Look, every school district out there has a crisis response plan. But here is the million-dollar question. Does yours actually hold up under extreme pressure? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really critical topic that impacts literally everyone: administrators, educators, families, and of course the students. We are looking at the true readiness of our school crisis response frameworks. Because, let's be honest, having a perfectly formatted plan sitting in a binder and having a plan that actually functions when everything goes completely wrong, those are two entirely different things. We're going to explore some incredibly striking insights from our source material on how to build a highly functional, reality-tested crisis response system way before the unthinkable happens. We've got a lot of urgent, fascinating ground to cover, so let's just dive right in. The worst time to write a crisis plan is during a crisis. I mean, it sounds like absolute common sense, right? But this stark, undeniable reality really sets the stage for the incredibly high stakes of today's topic. Think about it. When a crisis hits, adrenaline spikes, emotions are running high, and time just evaporates. You absolutely cannot be figuring out your protocols while an active situation is unfolding right in front of you. You need a rock-solid foundation already in place. And yet, as the text reveals, the foundations that a lot of schools rely on might not be nearly as solid as they appear on paper. To show exactly why these gaps exist, our source material vividly contrasts theory with reality. On one side, you've got the crisis in the binder. You know the one. It's that pristine, beautifully typed document sitting on a shelf in the admin office. In this version of reality, every single staff member is present, fully rested, and just waiting to jump into action. But then, on the other side, we have the crisis in reality. Picture this. It's 2:15 p.m. on a random Tuesday. Your primary school counselor called in sick this morning. A student sitting right across from your desk has just disclosed something incredibly serious, and out in the hallway, 3 other people are urgently waiting on a decision from you. This is the chaotic, improvisational reality of a Tuesday afternoon incident. The text grounds us in this exact lived experience because this is the crucible where plans are actually tested. And honestly, that brings us to a massive core vulnerability of these systems. Most crisis plans are written for the version of the crisis where everyone is available. But let's be real, that is rarely the version you actually get. Those heavy binders, they completely fail under the stress of real-world absences. If your master plan falls apart just because one key person is stuck in traffic or out with the flu, it's not a robust plan. Relying on best-case scenarios in a worst-case situation is a huge operational risk. We absolutely have to design our systems for the messy, unpredictable nature of real school days. Okay, so how do we fix this? The source breaks down exactly what separates a functional plan from a dusty binder into 5 critical pillars. First up, named backups. You need a specific named person for every role and a named backup for every single one of them. If you assign a role just to a job title, the plan breaks the second that person is out. Second, written escalation thresholds. These have got to be written down way before anyone gets emotional, because if you leave thresholds up to in-the-moment judgment, they will shift under stress every single time. Third, same-day clinical access. When a student needs help, referring them out shouldn't mean a massive waiting period. Fourth, a defined reentry process. When a student comes back after an incident, it can't just be improvised. There has to be a structured path. And finally, number 5, staff debriefs. The staff who handled the crisis need a debrief too, not just the student. Our source specifically notes that skipping this vital step is exactly how highly experienced people burn out and leave the profession. These 5 pillars, they would transform a theory into a highly functional framework. Let's look a little closer at that third pillar about same-day access, because there's a really powerful realization in the source text here. It states, and I quote, "A pathway that resolves in 2 weeks is functionally a gap, not a plan." Wow, let that sink in for a second. The crucial point here is that having a referral pathway that technically exists on paper means absolutely nothing if a student in an active crisis has to wait 14 days to actually see a licensed clinician. In the world of school mental health, a 2-week delay is an absolute eternity. It exposes the school to massive operational risk, and worse, it leaves the student incredibly vulnerable during a critical window of time. So this brings us to a really compelling solution outlined in our source material. Districts across Georgia are actively turning to clinical partners to bridge these gaps, specifically utilizing a model provided by MentalSpace School. Basically, they act as this vital clinical backbone for same-day readiness and prevention. By stepping in to help partner schools build out the clinical side of their crisis response, they're doing the really heavy lifting, We're talking training staff, standing up immediate referral pathways, and providing that exact immediate access districts desperately need. So a licensed clinician is available exactly when it counts, not 2 weeks later. When you look at how this structure is laid out, it brilliantly illustrates what comprehensive support actually looks like in practice. We are talking about same-day teletherapy, dedicated therapist teams for each school, crisis intervention, suicide and violence prevention, family counseling, and, super importantly, staff wellness. And these are licensed, culturally competent, diverse therapists. On the accessibility front, it's incredible. Medicaid is accepted at $0, and they work with major providers: BCBS, Cigna, Aetna, UHC, Humana, Peach State, CareSource, Amerigroup, you name it. By removing those financial barriers, they ensure the plan actually works for the whole community. And crucially, the whole shebang is strictly HIPAA and FERPA compliant, so student privacy is rigidly protected every single step of the way. Now, a quick but very important caveat here. While this model provides unmatched clinical readiness, the text makes a clear distinction regarding specific roles within the broader legal landscape. So MentalSpace School supports districts as they prepare for evolving Georgia school mental health legislation. However, for specific statutory obligations, districts absolutely must consult and be guided by their own legal counsel. The clinical partner's role is purely focused on readiness and care. It's a vital distinction. Schools need incredible clinical partners to execute their plans, for sure, but they must always rely on their own attorneys to ensure they're checking all the boxes for state legislative requirements. So, what actually happens when a school implements this kind of proactive, clinically supported response model? Well, the reported outcomes in the text are frankly staggering. We see an 89% improvement in student attendance, a massive 92% reduction in anxiety, and an 85% family satisfaction rate. I mean, to put that into perspective, those numbers validate the immense power of this clinical partnership model. It completely proves that moving from a theoretical binder to a proactive, same-day clinical readiness approach doesn't just check a compliance box. It tangibly works. It drastically improves the daily lives and the actual educational outcomes of the students it serves. So if you're an administrator or district leader, and you're maybe realizing right now that there might be some gaps in your own systems, the source text provides some really clear next steps. To build out your clinical readiness and get those vital referral pathways stood up, you can review their model or reach out directly to MentalSpace School. You can easily find them online at mentalspaceschool.com or just shoot them an email at mentalspaceschool@chchattherapy.com. Honestly, getting the right clinical partner in place is often the absolute fastest way to move your crisis plan off of a dusty shelf and directly into reliable daily operation. Which brings us right back to our final and perhaps most important thought of this explainer. I want you to ask yourself, if a crisis happens this coming Tuesday at 2:15 p.m., will your plan hold up? If your key counselor is out sick, if emotions are running high, if you need a licensed clinician in the room today and not 2 weeks from now, are you genuinely ready? We've seen what it takes to build a robust framework before you actually need it. Now it's really up to you to ensure your school isn't just hoping for the best, but is clinically and systematically prepared for reality. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this leaves you provoked, motivated, and ready to take a much closer look at your own school's readiness today.